how much time needs to be
Right.
to the public?
Well,
Because they won't have the actual wording if we...
right, and this is just going to be the first public hearing, then there'll be a second public hearing. So we could have like preliminary draft language. But the RSAs are real strict on when I have to have the first public hearing done, when I have to have the second public hearing. So I wanted to give us enough time so we could do that.
I understand that. Working from the other end, if we say today, it's for December 17th.
Right.
Doesn't that, well, we don't even know what it actually looks like. So when
Right.
when would the public have access to what would be heard?
We could do that in the work session.
Okay, so it should be December 4th.
I have to look at my calendar, but I think
And that's enough? That's enough notice between the 4th and the 17th? That's enough time?
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, I don't know if I would if I change that, but at least I can notice that we'll have a public hearing.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think we want any wording until we've looked at it.
Right.
So I don't want the cart. I'm just wondering, is this the cart in front of the horse? I understand from the back end, we have to meet that deadline. But we definitely want the public to feel that we have enough time to look at the actual wording we're going to discuss.
Right, well, right, it would be a draft for that.
Okay. So we met on the 4th. You'd have that language ready to the public on the 5th.
Yeah, that's going to be mine. My girl.
So that's 12 days. Access.
Wait, don't put the 4th here.
I'm not.
Let me go see what
Yep.
the date is.
Oh, that's a good idea.
First. It's
Okay, the 3rd, December 3rd.
$12.3 and $12.17.
And the 17th.
So, again, it's just like, this is something we're probably not worthwhile to even pursue, because I haven't drafted language yet, because I want to know, I don't want to come up with the whole thing, spend a lot of time if that's not even in the right direction.
But at tonight's meeting, there won't be any public input on it.
Are we all here?
Could be, but I haven't advertised this as a public hearing.
Like Ahern, Bert, London, Sean,
I mean, if you guys think, you know, don't
Dragon.
look at that. Look at it.
Mary, is Bob Dragon doesn't have a sign out? I mean, are you expecting him?
We're not expecting him.
Okay.
He called in.
All right, seeing that it's 6:30 by the clock on the wall, I'll call the meeting to session, the November 19th, 2009 Plymouth Planning Board meeting. I'm John Krugerberg, and I'm acting as the chair tonight. First, the second order of business is the roll call of members. Present is myself, John Ranlett, Vice Chairman, Mike Ahern, Bert Sutcliffe, Wanda Bishop, John Kelly as the Selectman's representative, Paul Wilson, and that's who we have. So absent is Bob Dragon and the Selectman's alternate, Butch Cushing. Item number 3 are public comments. If anybody in the audience has anything that they would like to speak about that is not on tonight's agenda, you're welcome to speak now. Hearing none, I'll move on to item number 4, administrative matters, and that includes the review of the October 15th minutes, which were mailed to everybody. Does anybody have any comments or concerns on the first page of the October 15th minutes? Moving on to page 2. And moving on to page 3. Seeing that there seem to be no revisions to the minutes, does anybody want to move acceptance of them?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we accept the minutes as drafted.
Second.
That was moved by Mr. Ranlett and seconded by Mr. Kelly. All in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain, not having been here.
Okay, so that is 5 yeas and 2 abstentions. Item number 5 is correspondence. I'll turn the table over to the town planner.
Yeah, no, we didn't have anything significant this month.
Okay, and then moving on to new business. We have 3 items of new business. The first is site plan review, a discussion and public hearing on a proposal from Dennis Prescott for site plan review to construct a 4,000 square foot retail furniture store at the corner of Tenny Mountain Highway and a to-be constructed street proposed to be named Hamilton's Way on a 1.31 acre lot in the industrial commercial development zone. Let's see, Mr. Prescott is
chatted
here.
about this a few weeks ago. Pretty picture. Tenny Mountain Highway. Sears is across the street. Proposed new road that hasn't been built yet. We're still finishing up the last little bits of that. Basically, joint entryway. Lot 5, Lot 4 will share this entryway for ingress and egress. Does a few things for us. Allows stacking, car stacking off the highway, which is a DOT, not requirement, but they like it. We do have a new permit that should be, I don't know if Miriam got that to you or not, but I did drop it off the other day. We have a revised new permit for this building. We also have the town sewer connection permit already in place. The proposed building is just under 4,000 square feet. Gives you 16 parking spaces, which we have allotted for. Pretty cut and dry. We're not in the wetlands. We're not in the 100-year floodplain. We're way under our coverage as far as lot coverage. Inside our setbacks. The only other thing is there is a well on site. There will be cross, because if you recall, some of you may not, these 2 lots are reasonably small. When I did the subdivision, we talked about cross easements at that time for drainage and well radiuses, so that's what we're using here. I happen to own both, so it's pretty easy to give myself an easement to both lots. That, in a nutshell, is what I have. There's not a lot else I can talk about. Any questions you have concerning the layout, the site layout? We are using an impervious underground drainage system. The light-colored pavement here is the impervious pavement. So the drainage comes off the building into the pervious pavement, into an underground, what I'll call a cistern. It's really not a single cistern, it's a bunch of pipes which come across and connect into a catch basin on the other side. We're not increasing the flow at all onto the state's land. No open trenches, no open ditches, no reeds to grow, that kind of thing. So everything's underground and not seen.
Thank you. Did you get a chance to see the planner's report?
I did not, but go ahead and read it to me. Did I ask any questions?
Well, actually, why don't I turn it over to the planner?
Yeah, well, I did send a copy to the engineer. You got a copy of it, correct? Okay. You received the application, and it's like Dennis said, a 4,000 square foot retail furniture store. We visited the site. We feel that it should be reviewed as a Class 3 major level of technical review due to the proximity of the project to a 100-year floodplain, wetlands, and there's detailed plans, drainage calculations that were submitted, and those need to, if something's submitted, then I feel it should be reviewed, and I don't have those qualifications to review it. That needs to be reviewed by the town engineer. And also, since they're doing a combination of porous pavement with that underdrain, that detention basin, that also requires an engineer to look at that. So that's why I'm recommending that there be an engineering review of the plans. And I'm recommending, I went through the application, he's turned in everything that needs to be turned in, except for a couple waivers. The waivers look fine, they're very reasonable. So I'm recommending that the planning board accept the application, and then if the planning board does decide to accept it, I'm recommending that you approve the site plan with 3 conditions. Condition 1, pending the contracted town engineer's approval of the subdivision and the site plan. The subdivision has a couple outstanding items that I've already talked to Dennis about. He's already aware of that. But once the subdivision's received the final town engineer approval, then we'd need to arrange a pre-construction meeting to start work on the subdivision, and then we could look at engineering review of the site plan and establish an escrow. And then the 3rd condition would just be to screen the dumpster from view with an opaque fence prior to the certificate of occupancy. That was it?
Okay, so in terms of our procedure, we first have to consider whether we consider the application complete, and we vote on that. And then with it, if we deem it complete, then we can have a discussion about it, open it up to a public hearing, and then discuss it further, converse with the applicant, and then make a decision. Yes, Mr. Kelly?
On the second page of these plans, am I looking at the wrong site? Because it doesn't look like the site that's up there.
Say that again, John?
It doesn't, the second page doesn't look like the same site that's up there.
It is cut off. That long, elongated section on the back would
Yeah.
continue out here.
This part here.
No, I'm not talking about it, I'm talking about the new road, because on this one, it shows just a small amount there, and it doesn't go all the way down
Okay.
to the...
You're in the
So
wrong spot.
This is Hamilton Road here, and then that's Hamilton Road here. This shows you just the existing conditions, so it's just showing you the land, but this is the one that would be the same, is what he's showing us.
So
This is the
one,
site plan.
this one is no longer any good?
Well, no.
You gotta
no,
have a series of
that's
different
That's the
plans.
one. So it's just a different scale, so that's why it's,
You really want to be looking at that
So
one.
these,
yeah.
That one and this one are
these are
the
the
same.
same lot?
No, that line right there is the lot line.
Okay, and where's the road?
The road comes in from Tenny Mountain this way. Common driveway.
Well, it has a small amount here, but here it shows the whole...
That's the
No,
frontage.
yes.
That's the frontage of the property.
But Tenny Mountain's over here.
Right, this is the new road that hasn't been built
Okay,
yet.
and this is the new road.
Correct.
What I'm asking is, there's only a little teeny bit there.
That's just an entryway. That's
Right.
a driveway entrance.
So,
I think it's
It
at a
would be right
different
here.
scale.
right, but, so this, all of this doesn't go to the road. I guess that's what I'm saying. This looks like the whole front goes to the road.
All that's showing you is the actual outside dimensions of that particular lot.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with construction.
Okay, now you say the road's going up through here?
The road goes much further, but we're only talking about this
Right,
lot
but
for
what
this
I'm saying
particular
is-
plan.
Where is the road, where's the location on this?
For,
That Hamilton Road or whatever?
right here. This is Tenny Mountain Highway,
So...
This is Sears
so it
right
looks-
here.
it-
and we're gonna take a left and go in.
If I were going to look at, this would be what I would say the lot was.
No,
No,
that's
the
just the
lot's way out here,
pavement.
John. This is the lot.
I know, I'm
Yeah.
not talking about that.
Parking lot.
I'm talking about this going on to Hamilton Road. If that was this,
Yeah.
this would look like this, I would assume, which would be the same as what that is.
See this dark light here, John? That
Yeah,
dark
I
line
understand that.
is this dark line, this light line. That's the same line, right around there. This
So
is the
what is
building.
this?
That's parking. That's
It's
the
just the
parking lot.
paved area.
That's a parking lot, and this is the impervious pervious pavement, so the water goes into there and into an underground drainage system. This is just parking. This is the building, this is parking, this is the lot,
Yep.
okay?
Yep.
This is on lot 4, so if he has a delivery truck, it can pull in and back up. It's opposite on lot 4, pull in, back up.
So
That's the only
this
reason
is-
that little L's
This is
there.
your lot
Yes,
here too, okay.
correct.
All right.
All right, if there aren't any further questions about whether the materials we have in front of us is being complete or not, I'd be looking for a motion to accept this as a,
I make a motion that we,
With the requested waivers.
this
recommendation
out-
that we accept the application as complete with the requested waivers.
is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
It's moved by Mr. Ahern and seconded by Ms. Bishop. Is there any further discussion? Everybody understand the waivers that are in question?
Could you repeat those again?
Yes. Could the town planner repeat the waivers?
Yes, you know what, I didn't go over the waivers. So the waivers are, one's for the site distance plan and profile, because this is the subject parcel's a corner lot, and it's cleared, and it's a 3% road grade, so he requested not to do a site distance plan and profile. The second waiver was about signs. He doesn't want to do his sign plan at this point. He'll come back and do the sign plan later. The third one was easement. The project does and will include a variety of easements such as sign, grading, drainage, and he'll do that later on with the Business Park Association documents. And the fourth one was on drainage. The project does include a .1 CFS, less than 4% of total stormwater increase, so he didn't feel that he needed to do this drainage report, and I had that looked at by the town engineer, and the town engineer thought that was reasonable.
Thank you.
Just one question.
Yes,
about
Mr. Kelly.
the sign. After the Divago signs that's on that other place, I really think that it might be a good idea to find out before they get the building built and everything else, what kind of signs are actually there, because that other development up near the parking lot, they got signs all over the place there, and sometimes it's pretty hard to see the roadway. And I just think that should be incorporated in the...
Right, well, let me clarify that he will not put up any sign until it's been reviewed by either the planning board or he meets our existing regulations. It's just that at this point, he's not ready to put up the sign, and he wants to, I guess you want to put up one for the whole subdivision.
When we did the original subdivision, we agreed to put up one directory sign at the entrance to the subdivision.
Yeah, I think what I'm
So
saying...
not, and I believe, and again, my memory's not real great anymore, but I think that's the only directional sign for the subdivision that we talk about allowing. In your regulations, he can put anything he wants on the building, still, I believe, up to some square footage, but that's up to the actual building itself. I think we've addressed the signage by the road in our original subdivision question. I mean, the sign hasn't been designed yet, John, because I don't know. I got one person going in there at this point, and we're not even going to put it up at this time.
Well,
so I don't have anything to design.
I think I'm sandbagging you in a way because of what has happened to your neighbor up the road there. Because
Well, he should have had to come in for a site plan and a permit whenever he put his sign.
Well, the other part where that new building is being put up in that complex, they have got ungodly signs there and many signs there.
But the question is, does it meet the regulation?
Well, I don't think anybody really knows what the regulations are.
Well, they're in a piece of paper.
We know the regulations. He came in and he got approval. He needed to change it later on.
Yeah,
so he came in and changed it later on.
Requirement, and that's what I suggest I do is when it comes time to actually put the sign up, when I have more than one person building, come back and see you with an actual sign design that I have absolutely no idea at this point what it's even going to look like. So if I gave you one, it wouldn't be the truth.
Right. So, and he wrote down here that he's going to comply with our existing sign ordinance, and if not, then he does have that option of coming back before us for site plan review on the signage. But as it states right now, he's going to comply with the sign regulations, so...
As I understand it, the sign regulations, you can have a sign 100 square foot for each business.
Correct.
So if he has 4 businesses there, you're going to have a 400-foot sign.
No. What we have on this site plan right here, it says directional sign easement. That's where the directional sign is going.
Right.
When we did the subdivision.
I'm saying per the regulations, you could have a 400-foot sign.
No,
Per the
he can only
regulations.
have 100 square feet. He can only have 100. 100, yeah, 100 square feet per business per lot.
Right, so when he sells all 4 lots, he can have a 400-foot,
No, I can only have 100 square foot.
because there's 4 businesses.
But he has
still
to, only can put
100
100 per lot.
Okay, so
100
there's
per
4
lot.
lots.
Right, so he has to put 100, 100, 100, 100, 100 on each lot.
They made one big sign.
Right, if he wants to do that, and if he wants a 400 square foot sign, he has to come back before planning board. It can only be approved by planning board.
There's no further discussion?
I mean, we could put you want a condition to bring the sign when you know what the sign's going to be?
If I
Or
put a sign up and I don't have a permit, you can make me take it down, so I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to put a sign up till I have a
That's
permit.
okay.
So I don't believe I need an additional condition. We know when I come to you for a sign permit, I'll have to have a sign design and a size, and it will have to meet your regulation.
So seeing no further discussion, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor of accepting this application as a completed application with the waivers, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, then now we move into a more detailed discussion of the application in terms of whether it should be approved, and that includes a moment for public hearing. Does anybody on the planning board have any questions for the applicant in terms of some of the details of what has been proposed? Does the applicant feel like they'd like to say anything else besides before moving into a public hearing?
I think you have everything that is of any consequence in that package. You've got a picture of what the building is proposed to look like. I honestly don't have colors because we haven't gotten that far, but it is going to be a barn-type looking furniture barn. So
What was going to be the facade? What material are you going to?
probably going to be 4-inch clapboard.
I'm sorry,
4-inch clapboard.
clapboard?
Yeah. The older barns actually had clapboard, not vertical siding.
And what is the, what kind of furniture sales will it be?
It's an existing furniture store on Tenny Mountain Highway that is down across from Harris Furniture. The guy down in the hole there,
Right?
Oh, yeah.
just for him. Here's the deal. So if Lowe's ever does decide to come back, he'll be out of the way. So it's an existing customer, existing Tenny Mountain Highway, nothing new except tax dollars. So,
So it's used furniture?
no, it's brand new furniture. Brand new furniture. And actually quite reasonable. Quite reasonably priced, so I bought a chair from him.
All right, seeing no further discussion from the board, I'll open up to a public hearing at 6:49. If anybody in the audience would like to speak to this application in a positive way. If there's anybody who would like to speak against this application. If there's anybody who'd like to speak about this application in a neutral way. Okay, seeing none, then I'll close the public hearing at 6:50 and return to the board and see if there's any further discussion, questions for the applicant, or a motion to move forward with this. I'll remind the board that the planner has identified 3 conditions that the planner recommends we approve this with. I'll ask the applicant, did you hear anything that you disagreed with in terms of the 3 conditions of approval?
Can you explain that first condition to me, Mary?
Yeah, I'll read it. Pending the contracted town engineer's approval of the subdivision and the site plan, so that's condition 1.
Yeah.
The subdivision has not received final town engineering approval. Approval must be granted prior to any work taking place at the subdivision. Also, pre-construction meeting needs to be arranged prior to any work taking place as per the development agreement, that was in the development agreement, signed by the developer. No building permit shall be issued for the furniture store until after the subdivision and the site plan have both received final staff approval. And then,
Have any issues with any of that?
and then 2, pending the establishment of an escrow account prior to engineering review. So the engineer's not going to do any review until there's an escrow. And then 3, with the condition that the applicant adequately screen the dumpster from view with an opaque fence prior to receiving your certificate of occupancy. So that won't be until after the building's built.
Yeah, no, I have no issues with that.
Because I didn't see screening on the, site plan. It just showed the dumpster.
Well, actually, it was number 1. What does Class 3 major level of technical review?
Okay. So what we have is, we have 3 levels of review.
Yeah.
A Class 1 would need no engineering review at all, and that's typically when you're downtown and there was one business and you move into that new business. You didn't change anything. Class 2 would be perfectly flat site and there's no problems. There's no wetlands. There's no anything unusual with engineering. And then the Class 3 is our majority. When you have a new building, when you have a road, this when you're talking about something innovative with doing your underground drainage. So then that needs to be looked at by an engineer. So that's what's Class 3.
I'd like to make sure the board knows that the engineer that did do this design has been trained, did take an 8-hour class, so he is trained. I don't know if the review engineers actually got the certificate to know about the newest drainage system. There is a 8-hour class at UNH, so I guess I got a little problem with if he doesn't know about it, I have a hard time with him reviewing it. That's my only.
Yeah, I understand. In the past, when that's happened, I mean, you've got to, trust your engineer, but in the past, when that's happened, he has consulted with an engineer that does have that training and have them do a sign-off letter.
Okay.
So we did have a question once about geotechnical issues, and then he had the person contact a geotechnical engineer, and then that person signed off.
Okay.
And because they know what they're certified, it should be a very easy
I
process.
always have a problem with reviews anyway, because I'm paying a certified engineer to do it anyhow, but that's beside the point.
Yes, Mr. Kelly?
Can I ask a question? In other words, if he builds this 4,000 square foot building on this lot, is there anything that would prevent him from building a lot bigger building sometime in the future?
Prior to him building the bigger building, he has to come back before us for that.
I understand that, but
Oh.
is the size of the lot and the shape of the lot and everything, would it be feasible that he could put in a much bigger building?
Well, there's lot size constrictions, John, so the obvious answer is I have to have parking based on your approval, based on your regulations. So virtually, this is about as big as it gets for this lot. There's not a speck more buildable space with your setbacks and the parking that makes sense. There's more land, but you got to cross a wetland to get to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could put a second floor on it, but...
But that's...
But then you still got a parking issue. So
Right.
the answer is unlikely as all get out.
I have a problem by a lot of your developers coming in and telling us what they would like. I have a 5-acre lot. I've got to develop of 20 acres. I want 5-acre lots, and then 6 months later, well, we'd like to split those lots in two, and then 6 months later, I want to split those lots in two. So eventually, you get 40 houses, and I just don't want that to happen, not only on this lot, but any lots that are along Tenny Mountain Highway.
I can't help you with anybody else's lot. This has a state-approved driveway permit for this building,
Right.
and the state will require, anytime you build a new building, to update that permit at that time.
Okay.
So the state will regulate ingress and egress, and your regulations will dictate how big a lot it can have.
So is there any movement on the board to approve or not approve?
I make a motion that we approve the site plan review with the following 3 conditions that was outlined by Miriam.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
It's moved by Mr. Ahern and seconded by Mr. Kelly. Sorry, Mr. Randlett. Is there any further discussion on this motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Very much.
The next item on new business is subdivision revocation. Discussion and public hearing to consider the revocation of the Ivy Lane subdivision, subject to the rules and procedures outlined in RSA 676 4A. This 4-lot single-family subdivision was originally approved by the Planning Board on October 19th, 2006. I'll turn this over to the planner.
Okay. The planning board first looked at this proposed subdivision on February 2006. The proposal started as a plan to subdivide 12.95 acres into 5 lots. In April 2006, the applicant changed their original proposal from 5-lot subdivision to a 4-lot subdivision. The planning board approved the proposed subdivision with conditions at their October 19, 2006 meeting. According to the Plymouth subdivision regulations, a subdivider shall construct all planned improvements within the subdivision and comply with all requirements within 3 years of approval. The board may extend the date an additional reasonable period of time upon a written request of the subdivider if the board finds that conditions exist that are beyond the control of the subdivider and prevent compliance with the 3 years. No work has taken place at this subdivision besides minor repairs to the road and some removal of trees. Staff has contacted the subdividers to see if they'd like to ask for an extension, but the subdividers have not indicated that they do want an extension. We went through the RSA about revoking a recorded subdivision, and it gives various conditions of when you can revoke it. I did contact the town attorney, and he looked through it and said that it does appear that the planning board should look to revoke this subdivision because a bond was never established and work was never done and an extension wasn't asked for. So therefore, in accordance with the Plymouth subdivision regulations, in accordance with RSA 676:4A, and in consultation with the town attorney, staff is recommending that the Ivy Lane subdivision be revoked by the planning board.
Thank you. In terms of the procedure, but has the Ivy Lane applicant, original applicant, and the neighbors been notified of this meeting?
Right. Yes, they've all been sent a certified letter, and we've put notice in the newspaper for public hearing.
Okay, there will be a public hearing. Before that, is there any conversation about this from the board?
I just have one clarification. There's the written text here, and then there was what was read by the planner. And I think that it's an important distinction, because what's written here, it said, staff has contacted the subdividers.
Which page are you on?
I'm sorry, on the very first page, second paragraph, it says staff has contacted the subdividers to see if they would like to ask for an extension, but the subdividers have indicated that they do not want an extension. And what was read before was that the subdividers have not indicated that they want an extension. So the former, the way that it's written, sounds like it's a...
If I may interject,
You may not.
we asked if we wanted to ask for an extension.
Could I finish making my point?
Sure, just go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. With what's written here, it indicates that the subdivision owner said they do not want an extension, but what was read was that they hadn't indicated that they wanted one. So there's a difference in meaning there, and I just wanted to clarify it.
Sounds like we should ask in a moment for a clear sense of what the applicants would like. Does that capture your concern, Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I'm not advocating for either side here, just a clarification of language.
Yes. Anything else? Okay, seeing that it's 7 o'clock, and I'll turn this into a public hearing. And would anybody from Ivy Lane like to speak?
Yeah, at no time were we contacted asking us if we wanted to ask for an extension.
That's incorrect. I've contacted them a number of times. I even...
And you
Do you
spoke
have
to
that?
us and
Do you
asked
have
us?
that?
Yeah, I
do you
have
have that
it
down
in
in
writing.
writing? Wait, do you have it in writing?
Yes, I do.
Okay, can we
And-
have a copy of
Yeah,
that?
I'd love a
please?
copy
Sure.
of that.
Sure, you can come to my office tomorrow, and I have you on the agenda, and you were going to discuss your extension at that agenda, and then you never came to the meeting. But
Who
I
did you
have the
speak to?
agenda.
Whom did you speak
Heidi,
to?
I spoke to. And
When?
Gosh, off the top of my head, I can't. It was May, maybe. I'll go check in my
May,
records.
maybe, or May?
I don't remember off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
It was a number of months ago.
Okay.
Okay, several months ago, maybe.
Would you like to clarify for the board what your wish is
I
at this
also know
point?
that you've talked to John Kelly a number of times, and that you've come to our office a number of times, and we've been trying to assess what exactly your wishes were without any kind of clear indication, even though we've
I think we were pretty
contacted
clear
you
what
a
our
number of
wishes
times.
were.
Okay, what exactly are your wishes? Because it was not clear to me.
We were pretty clear what the wishes were.
What are they? Just state it, please.
Well, let's
Please.
work through the chair for a moment.
No, I'm sorry. Some time ago, it's possible. I thought this was something
Go ahead.
recently.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to give you the opportunity to express what your wishes are.
Oh, what the wishes are, by all means, put this back into one lot.
Yeah.
Well,
And
that's what we're asking.
And what we would like to do as well, is make sure that we're taxed as one lot, and that the town tax collector is notified, as well as the registry of deeds as such. And by the way, could you please give me the dates that you filed the subdivision plan, and then give me the dates that you filed for the other part of the plan? Can you tell me what 2 dates those were filed to the Registry of Deeds?
Well, excuse me, working through the chair. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we understand
Sure.
what your position is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we're not in a position to make this be as sort of an individualized meeting. That would be something that would be appropriate to schedule, and it sounds like the town planner has records in her office that she could refer to help clarify
if I might
this.
interject just one second. It says here that that the subdivision was originally approved by the planning board on October 19th, okay? So my question is to you, when did you file that at the Registry of Deeds? Okay? That the planning board filed the actual subdivision, and then we'd like to know when you filed the other piece of that subdivision.
Those are excellent questions, but we will not, as a board, be able to answer that at this moment.
Okay. So how would you go about doing that then, answering those questions?
We would ask you to meet with the representatives of the town when they have access to those files.
Or they could at their convenience, they could certainly send that to me in writing. I would be appreciative of that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Kelly?
I believe that there should be writing on both ends of this so-called problem, because I've talked to these people quite a few times, and it always seems to have, it's somewhat like mercury, you know, that every time you put your finger on it, it scoots some other place. So if we can get them to write a letter or to the town planner, then 6 months or 8 months that goes by, we will not have to go into this discussion again. We can find the paper, because there's been too much vocal and not enough.
Right, if I might. Well, we're just asking for two simple things. One, the date that you registered the subdivision with the state, with the Registry of Deeds, and two, when you registered the development agreement with the Registry of Deeds. Those two items are the things that we're asking for, and we're asking you to send them to us in writing to end this. And we're also concurring with you that we would like nothing more than to have this subdivision put back into one lot and taxed as such, and also notify the Registry of Deeds on both of those items that we just spoke about.
The reason being is they were submitted separately, and we don't want there to be any questions with the Registry of Deeds. We had a heck of a time with them.
So if you could please notify the Registry of Deeds on the 2 dates, which you could send us in writing, which that would end the problem, because that seems to be the problem. So if you could send us that in writing, the 2 dates that you filed those two things, and also notify back the Registry of Deeds that you are putting this back into one lot and that you are taxing us as such, would be appreciative. That's what we're asking.
So in addition to the questions of these dates, I just want to make sure you said that you concur that the agenda that we're considering is revocation of the recorded.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
As long as you're going to put it back into one lot and you're going to tax it as such, and notify the Registry of Deeds about those 2 items you filed. Not the one item, but the 2. The development agreement you filed and the subdivision plan you filed, separately.
Okay. Are there any other issues that you'd like to address concerning this?
No, as long as you can send that to us in writing, we'd be fine.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to speak to this issue? Yes, sir.
Can you come up there?
Yeah, yes.
For the record, I'm Dwight DeVork, I'm a butter. As you may know, some of you may know, this has gone on for a long, long time, and
could I ask you in a nutshell, are you speaking in favor of us revocating this, the revocation?
in favor of having the subdivision reneged.
Okay, thank you.
And the reasons, just in case this should come to pass in the future and there's some difficulty because of the filing date or something related to a legality, I'd like to make my position clear, as well as I believe I speak for my neighbors, the Karens, who are also on Ivy Lane. We're both owners of property there. I've been a planning board member in the town of Wilkesboro, where I actually live, for a couple of years. I'm no longer on the board, but I know exactly where you're coming from, and I've been there and I've done it, and I appreciate everything you're doing. I only recognize 2 out of the board here for being on the original board that heard the subdivision process. I could be wrong, but My concern is that over this amount of time that's elapsed, which is over 3 years now, actually 3.5 years really, a lot of things get lost in the sauce, members change, awareness of the process and the issues get lost, and I would hope that if this comes to pass, that it becomes an issue again, that you would all refer to the original minutes starting in February 16th of '06 regarding the subdivision and the extended hearings that were taking place as a result. And particularly the issue of the town road specs, which have never been adhered to in terms of development for the subdivision. According to RSA 67441, which was brought up during those hearings, that road was supposed to be brought up to town specs in order to be allowed building permits on a developable lot with more than 2 lots, and that parcel was already subdivided, and one of the houses that I own as a result of that original subdivision, which was a Dearborn ownership at the time. So there's been no development, nothing has been done with that property with the exception of the erection of a fence at the end of the lane and the timbering of the property. So none of the conditions from the subdivision have been met. The culvert at the end of Ivy Lane, which was supposed to be part of the subdivision process, and the improvement of the road has not taken place, so we still have issues with the maintenance of the road, and as you may know, that's been a real problem with the town and with the residents there. In fact, last spring we had a washout, and that property ended up becoming the 2 properties became unreachable because of the road washout, which had to be repaired by the town. We also had a tree fall across the lane in midsummer. My tenant who was renting the property was the one that ended up taking it down because the property owner of the road has not taken the responsibility to maintain the road at all. So I'm concerned that if this subdivision were ever to take place, that it's got to be held to town standards, and I'm definitely in favor of it going back to its original form for that reason. I'd like to file with the chairman these copies of paperwork which relate to some of the communications between myself and also Horizon and KV Partners, Horizon Development, KV Partners, and New Hampshire DES on some of the stipulations that took place on the subdivision of that property.
I'll give this to the planner for the file.
Yes, please. And I'd appreciate if there's any discussion in the future that be kept on file so that current members of the planning board would be privy to the information.
Okay.
And that's basically my position.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience who would wish to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing at 7:11, and I'll return back to the board to see if there's any further discussion from the board on this issue, and whether there's a motion to move forward in one way or another. Yes, Mr. Kelly.
I'd like to ask the planner what the procedure is to take this out of subdivision.
Well, the procedure is just what Heidi was saying that she wanted. I contact the clerk and at the Grafton County, and then we have them revoke it. So then it will be turned into one lot.
Right. Now, and the road is a town road?
No, the town's a private road. It's owned by the Smiths.
How come the town had to go up and repair it, as the gentleman just said?
Because of the emergency fire and service hazard that presented an issue to both houses on the road for fire or rescue accessibility.
And why didn't the town charge the owner?
That sounds like a select board issue, isn't it, than a planning board issue?
Right. The property owner, which is the Smiths, they're responsible for the road. If the town fixed it, it was to deal with an emergency situation, and they should have sent a bill over to the Smiths.
Excuse me, if I might add something. We did actually speak with the town. We actually have a letter from the town that says that we actually fix it, and we have a letter that says that it's approved by them, that it's as okay as we did it.
Okay.
And also, we have to provide a right of way. We don't have to maintain it.
Okay, so they fixed the road.
It's nowhere in our deed does it say we have to maintain that right of way for those people. We just have to provide it. They can maintain it, or they can choose not to.
I seem to have a problem. In other words, the road isn't, I don't believe, up to the specs of the
It's not my
town.
primary, it's not our
Please.
primary interest.
Please. But the town has to repair it,
No, the town
No, you
doesn't.
don't.
The town absolutely doesn't, and we've never asked them to.
then am I getting a disconnect here? Because you're saying they didn't
Sure.
repair it, and then...
No, I'm saying they did come in onto the property
Yeah,
and
they
repair
have
it
in the
without
past repaired
asking
it.
us. Without asking our permission, they did that. They did
They have
repair
in the
it.
past.
They have in the past. And then recently, if you look on your site, you put down, in the future, if you'd like somebody to deal with Ivy Lane, please contact Heidi and Jason Smith at this
That was
number.
on your
It's
little
right on your little
TV
thing.
for a while.
On roads that Plymouth isn't allowed to repair.
Again, Mr. Kelly, I think that road issues are select board issues, and the question in front of us is, do we want to take this subdivision and revert it back to what?
Subdivision too, sir.
Well, really, the question is, do we want to keep a subdivision, or do we want it to be one lot, the way it used to
I
be?
guess what I'm asking is if you're putting it back in one lot, number one, what is the procedure? And secondly, I really don't care about having this subject brought up again once it's settled, because I keep, and I was one of those that at the beginning. It seems to keep resurfacing all the time, and there's nothing, not very much in writing, and time changes and everything, so I'd like to have it nailed down a little bit tighter.
Mr. Ahern?
I don't think there's anything that we can do to prevent it from coming back in the future. They have every right to.
Oh, yeah, I know.
But I think I'd like to make a motion that the existing subdivision that was brought to us originally back in 2006 be allowed to expire.
Be revoked?
Be revoked. And we'll end it and let everybody go back to their lives.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Randlett. Sorry, Ms. Bishop, you can just speech out. Is there any further discussion on this motion to revoke the subdivision?
And Neil, can I just say one thing? Can I ask one thing? We will...
Just a moment.
Oh, go ahead.
Because you're going to get exactly what you asked for.
Yeah, thank you.
Hearing no further discussion, if everybody in favor of revoking the subdivision, returning it to one lot, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It passed unanimously. You have one lot.
Okay, perfect. Now, the only other thing we ask is that if you could please send us that in writing, and if you could please tell us the two dates of the two times you filed for the Registry of Deeds, that they be notified by those two different things you
gotta
filed,
notify them
as
of
well
both
as the town for the
articles,
taxes.
otherwise they'll screw it all up again.
I think that your request to know this information is completely appropriate, but I
Okay.
think also it would be appropriate for you to either come into the office during a working day or to send a letter, and if you wanted to make sure we received it, you could send a letter to the town planner and to the select board and to the planning board,
Right.
and that way, with that kind of coverage, we could make sure that your specific questions were answered.
Right, it's just, all we're asking is that you notify the Registry of Deeds on both accounts, when you filed the subdivision and when you filed the other, and notify the town taxes, the tax collector, okay? That's it. Simple.
Just make it all go away.
Just make it go away.
I believe we all heard the planner say that was the process. Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 3. Proposed zoning ordinance text and map amendments. I'll turn this over to the town planner when she has a second to collect those papers.
Okay. I handed out a list of proposed amendments that the town of Plymouth has identified, and this is just in our day-to-day operation. We notice that there's some deficiencies in the zoning ordinance, so we keep a list and then we gather it all together, and then I made a list of what we thought were different problem areas that we want to discuss with planning board, that they, just to give me an indication of, when I go item by item, do you want me to pursue it or not pursue it? And then if you want me to pursue it, then I'll draft up some language, and then we can discuss that language and have a public hearing to discuss that language. And then we can look at putting it on as a warrant article, depending on the public hearings. The first one I just did as just a piece of information. It's the Ahern Road abandonment issue. That's going to actually be a Board of Selectmen warrant article. So you can just read about that, but just that you're aware of that situation.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, is it the intention to have a formal vote on each one of these?
No, not tonight, but, well,
We're looking for some sense of the board about whether...
I should go forward or not. So,
Right.
so it's not a vote on language, but just, would you like me to pursue it or not? Yeah, I would like a vote on each
Okay.
issue if I should go forward or not.
okay, if it needs to be a vote, then it will be a vote, but I misunderstood you at first. I thought you meant whether we were voting on specific
No, she
language.
said she was looking for a sense of the board, and I think that we need to vote individually on these.
Oh, we could do a
agree
vote or
with you.
consensus, however. Okay, the first one is regulations on methadone clinics. Some towns in New Hampshire don't have any regulation specific to methadone, which is a drug addiction clinic treatment center. This leaves these towns vulnerable to the location of a methadone clinic within their town limits, because without specific regulations, the clinic will follow the same rules as a pharmacy or medical office. I don't have any place to put it. So if somebody said, I want to open a methadone clinic, I would just look at pharmacy and medical office and permit it just like I would permit one of those. So the town planner, I'm recommending that we consider drafting an amendment to the zoning ordinance to regulate drug addiction clinic treatment centers due to the unique impacts. This is just me following the news and seeing that there's some surrounding communities that have had a lot of discussion and a lot of problems with it, and it's better to zone for it ahead of time than you have someone come in your office, you approve it, and then it creates a controversy. But the reason why I'm talking about that is because this is a unique regulated use.
Okay, can you give some examples of what the unique impacts are?
With methadone, you can't just sell it at a regular pharmacy, so you have to have a special treatment center. And the discussion that we've had is with people breaking into them, since there is a methadone problem where people are stealing the drugs, and it seems to create more needs. The town that I'm talking about is Laconia, and I know that now they said that as a condition of the methadone clinic, they needed to hire a police officer, and it's gone through a lot of discussion, and most of that reason was because they didn't have anything in their ordinance in place to look at it ahead of time.
Okay. Does the board have any other questions? I think it would make sense for us to, while it's fresh in our minds, to vote or have a consensus on each one of these and tell the planner whether we think we should have some zoning language drafted for our consideration at the next meeting. Of course, we could decide at that next meeting that, having seen the actual language, it's something that we do not agree with and just let it drop there. Or we're saying right now we want to drop the issue. Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I just have a question. I understand what's been said so far, but would it be the intention to create a zoning ordinance such that methadone clinics would be forbidden entirely from the town?
I had the same concern.
Well, I don't even know if we could do that, but I would like to just at least address it as a use, because right now it'd be treated exactly the same as a pharmacy, and it's different than a pharmacy.
Well, don't we have something like bars can't, standalone bars are not allowed in town or something like that? I mean, so it is possible to be zoned into a non-existence for the town, isn't it?
Into?
It's possible to be forbidden as a use, isn't it?
We could forbid it as a use, or we could put it as a special exception, or look at the districts.
So as you think about the language that you might be drafting for us, what kind of direction are you moving in?
Okay, so what I'm looking at is defining what a methadone clinic is, a treatment center, and separating it from a pharmacy, just like we did the standalone bar was different than a bar restaurant. So we define it, and then we look at it separately and see maybe it's appropriate in some districts, it might not be appropriate in other districts. Or maybe that we need to have a distance from residential neighborhood.
So would you propose in the language what districts it was allowed and not allowed in? Or allowed in by special exception?
Correct, if we want to treat it as a separate use, correct. You know, when you're a planner, you have to look at what the new uses are and sort of anticipate what might come, because the minute the person steps through the door, then they're automatically grandfathered. You can't regulate it once he steps through the door. So I'm trying to be proactive.
But you don't have the sense right now that you wish to forbid it from any zones?
No, I don't know if that would be permitted.
So in a sense, you really just want to define it?
Correct, define it, and then I don't think it would be appropriate in a residential neighborhood. So I would look at prohibiting in a residential neighborhood, but I would have to, you know, look at it. First we define it, and then it needs special conditions. I really am leaning towards it looking to review it as a special exception instead of a permitted use. If we do it as a pharmacy, like it would, if he came through my door right now, I'd say, okay, it's pharmacy, it's permitted, go right in. No kind of review. If we do it as a special exception, we look at case by case. So it throws it back into being reviewed. You could look at the size, impact.
So I'll ask the board, does this sound like an issue that we would like to consider at another meeting where we have some of these concepts fleshed out for us? Or do we just want to say this isn't an issue for us to consider, and for the next year they could come in as pharmacies?
I'd like to ask another question.
Yes, Mr. Wilson.
This is apparently an issue in Laconia. Where else is it an issue?
Oh, it's been
in central New Hampshire.
Oh, in central New Hampshire. I read the Citizen every day. I can't say I read the other newspapers, so I know Laconia. However, typically what happens in Laconia then happens to Plymouth. I mean, they're very similar in that they're service centers for a bigger area. You know what I'm saying? Like Laconia serves an area, and Plymouth also serves a certain area. So
I think if you think of a clinic as sort of social services, Plymouth does have several social services.
Correct.
In it as
we have a hospital. We have a number of social services here.
Social and health.
Again, it's better if we define it than if we don't define it.
And Ms. Bishop?
Yeah, I'm for it. I'm for regulating zoning it or making a special exception, because it's not something that I'd want in my neighborhood
Yes, Mr. Kelly.
or in town.
We keep using the word zoning, but we're talking about the planning board doing this. Is this something that the zoning board should be taking care of?
Well, there's the Zoning Board of
Or
Appeals.
the planning board should be taking care of?
No, I'm looking at an amendment to the zoning ordinance. So that's the planning board. The planning board amends the zoning ordinance. But if we did it as a special exception, then it would be reviewed by the zoning board. However, they don't amend the zoning ordinance.
Well, Ms. Bishop, was that a motion to ask the town planner to move forward with drafting some language which we can consider at a future meeting?
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Randlett seconds it. Is there any further discussion? Would everybody in favor of having the town planner draft this language and look at it in the future, please raise a hand? Anybody opposed? So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 in favor, and were you abstaining?
One abstention.
And one abstention. All right. We can move on to the second issue or proposal is accessory structure setback.
Currently, accessory structures, which is your, storage shed or your detached garage, it must meet the same building setbacks as the principal building, which your main building, your house, is 30 feet from your front yard, 15 from your side, 15 for your rear. So if someone wants to locate a storage shed, or let's say they just want a detached garage, they're required to put it 30 feet from the front, 15 from the side, and 15 from the rear. In actuality, how people want to do things is they want to put their storage shed in the back, and they want to put their their garage next to their house or sort of close to the side property line. So right now, if they want to do that, then they have to go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for a special exception. And to me, from the towns that I've been planners in, this is pretty onerous. Typically, it's 5 feet from your side property line. They recognize that an accessory structure is smaller and that people typically want to put their storage shed in the backyard and they want to put their detached garage
in the front next to their house, next to their driveway. So that was something that I was looking at is let's lessen that a little bit. If an accessory structure, let them put it 5 feet from the side and rear yard.
Are there some definitions limiting the size of an accessory structure?
Well, we could do that too, and I have seen that too, because you do want your accessory structure to be accessory, you know. The one problem we've had is people with garages, and sometimes, you know, typically you saw a 2-car garage, now it's getting to 4 or 5-car. So maybe at that point, then we want to look at, you know, it's not an accessory structure. At that point, it needs to be set back 30 feet. But the storage sheds are typically, you know, 10 by 20, 10 by 15. I mean, it's a smaller size thing, or 8 by 10.
So maybe some square footage sense of when a threshold is crossed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Or maybe a proportion, done in proportion to the size of the main dwelling.
Right.
I've seen that too. That makes a lot of sense too. That it really is accessory to the main building. It's not the same size as the main house.
Does anybody else wish to ask any questions about this? How about we work in a different way? Does anybody object to the town planner drafting up some language, some more specific language for us to consider? Okay, consider that another charge.
Okay.
And then the third item, duplex house versus 2-family dwellings.
Yeah, this is sort of peculiar in our ordinance. The duplex is any dwelling having a living quarters, one of which must be owner-occupied for 2 families within separate entrances, okay? And then the 2-family, it doesn't have that owner-occupied part of it. But, let me see if I can remember how this is done. According to the Plymouth use table, in the multifamily district, the 2-family dwelling is permitted, but the duplex where you require the owner isn't. And it didn't make any sense. So, and I don't know if it got switched around in the table, if that was a mistake, I don't know, but it doesn't, you're having the one where the owner's living in it, but yet you're not permitting it, and you're allowing the one where the owner doesn't live in it. So staff recommends this table be adjusted to permit a duplex house and a 2-family dwelling in the multifamily district as a special exception, that both of them should be special exceptions. Don't be less stringent when you're renting the whole unit out.
So maybe you could bring to us the whole table that looks like a typo, and then a draft of the table corrected?
Correct. Yep, that would be easy to correct, but this has come up a number of times, and it's just very strange. So,
does anybody object to the town planner working on this? Oh.
Well, I always wonder about the table. I had looked at this at one point a couple of years back, and it makes absolutely no sense in my mind. I did the same, like that's allowed and this isn't. Could you just strike one of the two? Could you eliminate duplex house altogether from the zoning ordinances, so you would immediately then fall under 2-family, even if it's owner occupied? And it would make a lot of sense. There's 2 families, one of them owns it, still 2 families.
Okay, so just remove it. Yeah, I don't know what the thinking was or how it, I mean, I would have suspected that if the owner lived in it, you could even allow it in a single-family district, or, you know.
It would be less restrictive or something, but it would make at least sense to have one or the other. I never understood why there was a definition of each, to be honest.
Okay, I can look at, we could do it that way, just eliminating one of them, or, like as I said, make both of them a special exception in the multifamily district. I mean, surely if it's multifamily, you're allowing multifamily, so it didn't make sense not to.
Why don't you think about it and bring it to us at the next meeting, and we'll possibly act on it then.
Okay, number 4, lots in 2 zones. The language right now says that where a zone boundary line divides a lot of record, at the time such line is adopted, the lot shall conform to the regulations. Okay, I'm just reading this, guys. For the more restricted zone, provided the lot has frontage on a street in the more restricted zone. When a zone boundary line divides a lot, at the time such line is adopted, the regulations for the less restricted part of such lot shall not extend more than 30 feet. I mean, it just goes on. I really think it's very confusing. It doesn't need to be confusing. The language that I'm proposing is just when a lot of record is shown to have more than one zoning designation, okay, there's two, the predominant zone shall be the zone that must be complied with. For in other words, if the majority of it is zoned A, and there's a little corner that's ICD, then it should be A. And not doing this whole 30 feet, and you're moving over here, and you're moving over there. I don't know, just look at it and see what the majority of the zone is.
But the current, not that I'm in favor of things being clear, but what seems to be cutting out is the idea that it's important what kind of a street the lot is on, what the front of the lot is on. That's captured by the beginning of this.
Yeah, and
So I mean, if you said predominant, that could be, well, I've got 30 acres here and 1 acre there, so I'm going to go with the 30 acres. But if the 30 acres is agricultural and the 1 acre is residential, you go with the agricultural, even though the road that accesses that lot is residential.
that makes sense,
commercial.
but then again, the way that the actual lines have been hasn't had anything to do with roads. So it's just, it's like the line has crossed through and it's been on both roads. You know, the single family and the agricultural have both been on the road. There's just got to be a better way of doing it.
Mr. Ahern?
That might be a good one to let the town council look at, I think.
And also, you know what, I address it later on too, so when we get to that, I'll flip it over. We might be able to take care of it in one of my map amendments.
Okay. And in the...
But that's a good suggestion, Mike. I'll have town council come up with this suggestion. Okay, so, okay, should I just go to number
5?
5? Is that okay? I mean, I will have
Yes.
town council look at it, because that makes sense. All right, 5, family unrelated. The Plymouth zoning ordinance, all right, this comes up a lot. Okay, the Plymouth zoning ordinance definition is as follows, quote, "Any group of 3 persons or less, not related by blood, marriage, nor adoption, living together as a single housekeeping unit. In determining the maximum number of persons, the children of any resident shall not be counted." This definition needs to be more clearly stated because the town of Plymouth does not permit more than 3 unrelated individuals to live in a dwelling unit. Staff is proposing the following definition: not more than 3 unrelated persons occupying a dwelling unit and living as a single housekeeping unit are permitted. Again, just making it clear and saying that it's not permitted, because we have the definition right now, but it doesn't say, is it permitted or not permitted, it just defines it.
So you're not changing the definition of an unrelated family. You're changing the restriction.
We're stating clearly that it's not permitted.
Right, but you're not changing the first quotated...
No, not changing the number. The number's the same.
You're not even changing that sentence, right? It's still, an unrelated family still will be defined as any group of 3 persons or less not related by blood, marriage, nor adoption, living together as a single housekeeping unit. That will stand?
Yeah, I know. We could keep that in there, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
Yes. Yes. The part about the children of any resident shall not be counted, I mean, it's just not necessary because children are related. So, you know, you're related to your children.
I just wanted, since your last sentence is staff is proposing the following definition, I wanted to make sure what definition was going to be replaced. And you're not replacing the first one.
Yeah, no, replacing the first one with the second one. Not more than 3 unrelated persons occupying a dwelling unit and living as a single house, or we could just add that as a sentence.
Well, I guess I would definitely want to see it because I keep hearing you saying that you are going to replace the current definition, and I'm asking you if you're going to keep the first sentence or not.
Okay. The first sentence?
Yes.
Okay.
Does that...
That's fine.
So this new definition is not a replacement, it's a
change.
Is that right? We'll see. We'll see you in the next iteration.
Okay.
And then you have some.
Yeah, the current definition is 2 sentences, and I'd like it to go to 1 sentence. So how about that? And I'd like it to say, is not permitted.
You'd like what to say is not permitted?
Family unrelated, not more than 3 unrelated persons occupying a dwelling unit and living as a single housekeeping unit are permitted, not more than 3 unrelated people. The first one doesn't say that. It just defines it. Just says 3 people living together. Okay?
Well, is that not in the definition section of the ordinance?
Nope. This is the definition section.
So the definition section of the ordinance should only define the term, not then propose what is allowed and what is not allowed. It should only explain that term, family unrelated, is the following.
Okay. Then we need to put somewhere that it's not permitted, though. So maybe it's not in the definition section. It's got to be...
Yeah, that should be your task, is to find out where that restriction needs to be.
Okay.
But otherwise, you're saying that the definition of an unrelated family is 3 unrelated persons. I mean, unrelated is unrelated.
Not related.
So, yeah.
Unrelated is not related, yeah.
Okay.
The question we got was that the second sentence, it says, in determining the maximum number of persons, the children of any residence shall not be counted. And then the last, this is an actual real-life example. What we had was each resident had 3 kids, and so we had 3 unrelated people, and then one had the boyfriend moving in with them, and then each one had 3 kids. I mean, it just was overcrowded.
But it sounds to me like we need to have the definition be clear.
Yes.
And then somewhere else, we need to start talking about what we do with the definition.
Correct. That is correct.
Anyway, on to map amendments now.
Right. So map amendment 1, I think, could help with lots in 2 zones a lot. Because what we're looking at is look through all the split zone properties and rezone them so that parcel is only attached to 1 zoning designation.
I've got a question, though, about the consequence of that. If it's a large lot, and then the lot is, if it's all put into the same zone, and then and somebody wants to subdivide it in the future, then what happens? You could have a piece of property that was formerly in 1 zone, that it was removed from it, but now that it's been subdivided and it's on its own, it is now fully inside of what the zone it used to be in. If you can follow that. It at least looks to me like you could strand a lot by doing subdivisions. If you go through and you rezone the entire big piece of property and it's subdivided, what you can do is strand or foreclose the possibility of subdividing a piece of property.
I don't know. I'm not following you.
Sounds like it would be a case-by-case concern.
Well, honestly, is traditionally when you zone, the zoning line should either follow a street, the center of a street, property line. It should follow something. Our zoning maps are just squiggles that make absolutely no sense. I mean, it's just a squiggle. I think what happened was when technology changed and we started getting more exact, what used to be a property line wasn't a property line. You know, when the scale changed or whatever. So zoning lines should follow along a property line. No one's property should have some kind of curvy line going through their backyard and splitting it into 2 different zones. It just doesn't...
What about a straight line?
Okay, even a straight line. I mean, you shouldn't split zone a property. It's just, it's not in the principles of zoning. If you were going to take a class on Zoning 101, your zoning line should go down around a property line or go maybe along a river or go along a road. You just don't split your property with 2 different zones. You're going under the assumption that you want to treat that piece of property the same. Your front yard is going to be the same as your rear yard.
How many split-zoned lots do you suppose there are?
Well, we have a number, and this request actually came from the, well, I guess I could say, the Bob Dragon property, which is right on Highland Street and Tenny Mountain Highway, and there's people that want to develop it, and it's very concerning to them that it's got 2 different zones on it, and the line doesn't make any kind of sense. That one's, I don't know if it's squiggly line or straight line, but it doesn't make any sense, and it's concerning them with trying to develop the property because they don't know what they have.
So, but in terms of, would you say there's less than 20?
Well, it depends on if we're going to go through the whole town.
Well, that's what I thought you were proposing.
Yeah, there could be more, probably 50, I'd guess.
Mr. Ahern, a question?
Yeah, I think we're going to open up a huge can of worms. I mean, if someone has property on Tenny Mountain Highway, and then the rest of their 150 acres borders a residential development, and then you're going to start drawing lines, it has 2 different uses, one on Tenny Mountain Highway and one in a residential subdivision. So I just can't see how you could do that.
You could just be waiting for the developer to build the road back there.
You know what,
have your back.
I understand what you're saying. It sort of depends on the size of the lot. If you're talking about a 1-acre lot, right, or a half-acre lot, would you agree that a half-acre lot, there's no need to split zone that? Versus if it's a 100-acre. All right, or if the planning board prefers, we could, like, for example, when that property comes to be developed, Tenny Mountain, Highland Avenue, when it comes before the planning board, maybe we could have the planning board determine, should we look at it as a split zone lot, or should we rezone it to one zone?
Well, I don't think we have that option, which is why I think Mr. Ahern's proposal is very good. We already have language that tells us which way we're supposed to go.
Yeah, but...
So that's why an attorney needs to tell us.
Yeah, I mean,
It seems
that language
also
doesn't work
that
at all.
it seems also that it would allow for a great deal of abuse with merger of lots also. And I think maybe that's the same thing that Mike was saying. Somebody could own a small piece of property that's in a commercial zone. They could buy 100 acres adjacent to that, merge them together, and then somehow find the larger piece of property all in the commercial zone.
Well, that would be what you would request the next time the map was drawn, is to go around the outside of your bigger lot. Right.
Right.
I mean, the thought is when you have a lot, there's a lot here, you put one development on it. So it should have one zone. I mean, right now we have a lot, they want to put one kind of development on it. They don't want a zoning line going through their building.
Well, it makes sense in a small lot, but I think it's the big ones.
Right. Okay, and I'm just saying that this lot in 2 zones, I've been working with it a long time. It just doesn't work. We're going to have to look at revising it a little bit, because you could have a lot, the majority of it, 100 acres is zoned one thing, and one little corner is zoned something else, and then it has to go with the more stricter zone?
Well, I think Mr. Ahern's kind of onto something about the can of worms that could be opened. Maybe a few examples so we could get a better sense of, because right now we're talking about a big black box that we can't see into. So maybe if you especially if there's only a handful of small 1-acre or less lots,
okay,
maybe we could see what we're looking at and have a more fruitful discussion.
Yeah, this is one where I see potentially a few benefits in a few places, but a whole lot of problems that I can see right now, and I think a whole lot of other problems that we can't see right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
I think this one has can of worms all over it.
Okay, and also another thing is the majority of time that I've been looking at it, it's been the difference between the A zone and the ICD, which there isn't one that's more restrictive or less restrictive. They're both just about the same. So, and that's the most common example that I see. It's ICD and A, and I couldn't even tell you which one's more restrictive. I don't know. They're both about the same in what they allow.
So we started this off with you asking for a sentiment of the board of which ones you should bring back to us at our next meeting, and in theory, those may go to a public hearing at the following meeting. Do you have the time in your workload to do all of these? Because so far we've been pretty much giving you the nod.
I know. I don't know. We'll have to see. But with this one, I'd like to at least bring that one lot, and let's at least talk about that one lot. The one where the developer has concerns, and it's between ICD and A, so there's really not that much difference. However, in terms of them trying to get financing from the bank wants it zoned one way, not split.
But isn't that Aren't we entering into spot zoning then?
But you asked for an example. I mean, if I
Yeah.
could just bring that one example, and then we can see what we want to do.
Well, I guess that's why I was hoping there was only maybe 5 or 6 of these on the town.
Well, we could say, you know, the ones that are on Tenny Mountain Highway, or the ones only when it's ICD and A. You know, maybe the ones that follow that same kind of pattern. If it's an example between ICD, you know, industrial commercial district, and single family, sure. I mean, that's a big difference. So we could, you know, we don't have to look at those.
We have one developer with a problem now. Is that representative of a whole class of problems? And do we have
Yeah.
other people,
Yeah. On Tenny Mountain Highway, this problem I see again and again and again on Tenny Mountain Highway, where there's a line between the ICD and the A, and there isn't one that's more restrictive, and all they have is a property that's not worth as much because it's got a split zone, and so then it causes them problems with getting that mortgaged or getting a loan on it with the bank, because the bank doesn't like that.
Yes, Ms. Kelly.
And there's no need for it. There's just no reason to have a property split zoned.
Is that...
Most towns just plain don't allow split zoning. It's just not good for the property owner.
Is that the prevalent problem on, and I don't know northeast, west, or south, but going towards Rumney, on the left-hand side of the Tenny Mountain Highway?
Correct.
Is that the majority of your
Correct.
problems?
Correct.
So the
Correct.
zoning goes up to a certain spot, and I don't know, like Boulder Point, I'm not too sure as to how that works out. It goes up for commercial for a ways, and it goes into agricultural?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Now-
But remember, our agricultural zone allows commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the problem on that? In other words, if both of those zones are basically allowing what the other one is, other than agriculture not being commercial, what is the problem with the two zones?
Right. Well, my point is, when you have a property that's split zoned, and you take that to the bank sees that as a red flag. Why do you have a split zone? Whereas I'm saying it's a pretty meaningless distinction. In ICD and agricultural zone, when you look at the table, they're basically the same. There's little minor differences, but I couldn't even tell you which one's more restrictive.
But I think that's an argument that somebody could make to the lender. It seems like we're kicking over the chess table of the whole town for the sake of
Okay,
somebody's...
if there was a rational reason to split zone it, but I don't see any rational reason for doing it. There's got to be a reason why you're putting a line there. A line shouldn't just be a line there, just to put a line there. There's got to be a reason.
But we're not putting it, the line exists. We're not putting.
Right, and I have no idea how that line got there. It doesn't follow any kind of logic.
In the case of...
And zoning should follow logic.
Mr. Chairman, I don't quite see what the problem is between agricultural and commercial. I really would find a problem if it was commercial and residential. So if for some reason, I'm going back to Boulder Point again, only because I know that a little bit, if that's agricultural and then the other is commercial, and single-family homes are being built up there, then you still could build single-family homes up there. But if somebody said, I don't want that agricultural now, I want it as single-family homes, then you would really have a problem of a split lot, because one is much more restrictive than the other, right?
Correct. So maybe I should just look at, let's say, Highland Street to Mayhew Turnpike, and just the problems that are ICD and agricultural, where, you know, I don't have a clear understanding of why lines were made. And if people have a logical reason why the line should be there, then the line should be there. But whenever you draw a zoning line, there should be a reason why the line's there.
But why should you even worry about it? Because one's agriculture and the other's commercial, and they're both allowed, right? It's only because the bankers have a problem with it. Is that
Well, and the
my
developers, don't we want to encourage development in the town and lessen confusion? Why provide someone with a confused situation?
They're going to be able
for
to
no reason?
develop it, whether it's commercial or agricultural.
Well, how many complaints have we received that our split zoning has caused an economic problem?
Every time they see that their property is split zoned, it makes things more difficult for them, and I don't see a reason why.
But we haven't been told that the job went through, fell through because of it?
This one, the one that I'm talking about in particular, it's very concerning to them, and they don't want to mess with it.
But other than that, you haven't heard?
That one, and then there's been other properties too that it's...
Mr. Sutcliffe had
It just causes them to have second guess it, and why? There should be a reason if you're going to put a zone in. Or change it.
Mr. Sutcliffe's
The more
voice.
discussion there seems to be on this, the more it's centering on this section of town, and it sounds like it's more of a moving a line issue than a redefining an ordinance issue. I mean, I like the fact that this is focused more under map amendments now than lots in 2 zones.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like the ICD line is in the wrong place to me. And whether that follows lot edges or we arbitrarily move it 100 feet further away from Tenny Mountain Highway or something along those lines, I would see language in that.
I don't think the intention was to put the line through lots. I think that's what happened after we kept changing maps and changing scales and, changing our technology or whatever. But I don't think the intention was to put that zoning line right through all these lots.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I'd suggest that it's a real long shot to believe that language could be put together in time for a public hearing in December on this issue. It sounds like a very complicated issue.
I agree, and I was actually thinking that if we were going to move forward with this, we should put this at the very bottom of the agenda, because you can see how much time we've taken on it here, and we haven't even seen the formalized stuff, and we haven't even heard from the public, which will have some opinions too.
Right.
Mr. Ahern?
Yeah, I'm completely against looking at rezoning any of the lines at this time, and I can't see doing it in the future, but there might be a reason in the future. But right now, definitely, I mean, we've heard this talk before about people being afraid because it's agriculturally zoned, and they don't want to go, they don't know what it means, and they don't like the term, and it bothered me then, and this is bothering me now.
Okay, and let me just clarify, it's nothing against agricultural zone. It's the part that a person has a property, and it has 2 zones on it, and that causes difficulty because of this language of lots in 2 zones, and the lot shall conform to the regulations for the more restricted zone, provided the lot is frontage on the street of the more restricted zone when a zone boundary...
Right, I think you've got
it's just very cumbersome.
I think you've got a very valid concern, and it's really the duty of this planning board to make sure that when the town planner says this doesn't conform to the way it's done around the country in terms of standards of using roads or this or that we should look at it. But I'm concerned about the time frame, right. And so I think I would suggest that we try to front load this on sort of the next year, after we get through this cycle, that we prioritize this so that we have a full discussion of it and really understand what might be happening. I know that might be inconvenient for anybody who's hoping to get the change done sooner, but I think that'd be fair to the process.
Sure.
Mr. Kelly?
Could we have the town council look this over and see if there's any glitches in changing the zoning or anything like that?
Well, I mean, the planning board and the town has the town votes on whether the line will be drawn, so that's sort of, it's the will of the people.
I'd suggest that the town council would react to language.
Yes.
I think we're far away from proposing language at this time.
So, Mr. Kelly, I think the spirit of your request is appropriate, but we're not there yet.
Sure, or I will have town council look at lots in 2 zones. I'll have them weigh in on that, and that might help us a lot.
Yeah, okay.
So...
Are there any other map amendment issues you want to raise?
Okay, so for number 1, we'll just postpone that. And for number 2, okay, study Highland Street from Main Street to Tenny Mountain Highway to see if part of Highland Street should be rezoned from SFR, single-family residential, to CI, civic institutional. What it is on on Highland Street, when you look at the existing conditions versus the current zone, the existing conditions is you see a lot of civic institutional uses. There's the hospital, there's the fire department, there's a doctor's office there. It's a very high-volume road. So I was looking that I'd like the zoning to reflect what the actual conditions are there. So that's why I was looking at rezoning it from SFR, because it doesn't have that single-family residential character to it anymore, and look at civic institutional. There are a number of single-family homes on there, and civic institution, single-family homes is a permitted use, so it doesn't affect the existing single-family homes that are there. However, if there is a vacant lot or a lot that's been in disuse for a long time and someone wants to put an office there, then we should consider it if we rezoned it to CI. Currently, it's not permitted. You cannot put any office on Highland Street because it's on SFR.
So there's an office over by the hospital, and there's an office near the high
school,
schools.
yeah.
So those are just non-conforming to current zones.
Correct. Yeah.
So the question is, do we want to make that?
Or unless they got
conforming?
use, I mean, they could have gotten use variances.
Okay. Mr. Kelly?
Where does the zoning line run through? It's my understanding that Bentwood's office is not in a single-family zone.
Okay, is that the office that's right by the elementary?
Right by the school.
By the school,
Okay.
yeah.
No, that's in the single-family zone.
Yes.
Yes, he got, I think he might have gotten a
Right.
use variance, yes.
Right.
Use variance from the zoning board.
So, and the rest, in fact, there was a business there, and they've removed the building now. It's gone. And there's a lot of residential houses and, you know, reasonably high-valued residential houses there. And it always was a stigma with that little store there, because number one, it had used its usefulness, and it just died a natural death, and it sat there for a long time. But I really don't have any concerns about it, but I'm just wondering about the other residents of that particular section there. You know, I don't think there's any commercial businesses from the bottom of that hill, I call it Ward's Hill, which is always known as, to beyond Reservoir Road. The top of that hill is all reasonably high-valued homes there, and I'm not too sure how they would really consider changing that into even civic. So I think it's basically up to the people up there, and I do hope that we have enough notice so those people will come. If they don't care about it, then I would certainly, say rezone it. If they cared about it, then of course they're going to be here talking about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the beauty about civic institutional is it would not allow retail, but offices, small offices that are open 9 to 5 and then it's closed, shouldn't have any kind of impact on a single-family residential house, because those homes are beautiful. I wouldn't look at hurting the residential character at all of that, but you need to face the reality of Highland Street, and so that's why I'm saying civic institutional makes sense. That's what kind of uses we're seeing out there, and there's no reason to prohibit a doctor's office from going in.
I have a question. This is...
Yes, Mr. Wilson.
Number 2, it says, study Highland Street from Main Street to Tenny Mountain Highway. Is it the object, then, of this to conduct a study, or is it, in fact, to rewrite the zoning for Highland Street?
No, to study it, because we don't know where to put the line, so you'd have to start with a current use inventory, and no, it's study.
Are you saying that we need a warrant article to do a study?
Oh, no. Sorry.
No, you want a study so that the results of the study would result in a warrant article in the next few weeks.
But that wouldn't be... Could something like that be prepared in time for a December public hearing?
No, probably not. I just put it on there.
Well, then maybe again, this is another one of those issues that should be front-loaded into the sort of the next term if we're trying to figure out what we can get done in a reasonable amount of time, since we only have a few weeks, if I'm understanding the timeline correctly.
Correct. As I said, it's just, we have a folder, we keep a folder of things that need to be done. In terms of having it all figured out of how long it was going to take me exactly to do everything, no, I haven't. I just want to know if there's interest, if you want me to pursue it or not.
It seems to me that this is one that was kicked over to us by the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
I think you're right.
Because of one proposal that they're suggesting a rezoning of all of Highland Street. And frankly, that doesn't strike me as a compelling case. We have one applicant who wants to do something different there.
Although, I mean, from the perspective of what a zoning map does, is it allows a community to define what they envision their future to be. And
Right.
if the community felt that there's already high volume of traffic on Highland, that it's a corridor, and that it makes sense for business to be there, the community should be able to say that's possible in the future. Not that I'm saying it should be. Yes, Mr. Kelly.
I think the high volume traffic is only due to the school being there. And the school has nothing to do with other businesses. In other words, again, I go back to statistics really don't mean anything, because whoever wants to use their statistics are the ones that are going to be bringing it up. So yes, there's a high volume of traffic. No one can say there isn't, because I meet up with it every morning and every night. But 90% of that high traffic is going down to the high school. So you don't really know. If you move that school away from there, then it would be more of a residential type of a neighborhood than it would be a commercial type of neighborhood.
Right, I agree with you. Well, what's the will of the board? Do we want this to be studied in the next year? Doesn't sound like it. So, any other map amendments or adjustments you wish to address?
So, number 3 was that property I've already talked about, Highland Street and Tenny Mountain Highway. Just because, I have had a request to look at that. Again, I don't know if this is where the line was intended to be. If it's just a mistake, what's called a map error, then we should look at correcting it. There's no reason to perpetuate an error. If you have no, if the planning board doesn't even want to look at it, I'd respect that. I just think if it's an error, it's an error.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, could we put this on the agenda for the next meeting and discuss the one particular issue rather than the broad picture of it?
Yeah, that's why I have it as a separate number.
If you, from your professional opinion, think there was some sort of error made, that's exactly with the grid. We should correct errors, I would think.
Correct. To me, it appears like an error. I can't. If there's someone in the public, someone that knows the history of why they put the line there, great.
Do we have a?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have a picture of the zoning map that we could look at right now, real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the zoning ordinance.
Did anyone bring their zoning ordinance?
I've gotten lazy about bringing one.
Okay, can I just prepare it for our next meeting, though? I'll have a nice size and everything.
Yeah, because our next meeting will not be a public meeting, so if it's a non-issue and we throw it off the table, it's not going to weigh down anything.
Yeah, I'll have it prepared for the next time. I apologize. I brought all this other material up. I forgot my zoning ordinance, and
I didn't have
but even if
mine
I
either.
showed you the zoning ordinance, it'd be too tiny to see.
Are we talking like, a few feet into the lot that's several acres, or are we talking, 40% of the lot? What are we talking?
40%, I think.
Oh. It's non-issue to me. I'd say leave it alone.
Yeah, it seems.
Leave it alone, even if it was an error.
Yeah. Don't touch it. That's my
There's some
feeling.
wetlands back there, too.
Well, I mean,
It's not a mistake. 40% of the lot's not a mistake.
does the person who owned this lot have an interest in having it changed? I mean, it would be terrible, I think, if I owned a piece of property, suddenly have the planning board tell me, oh, you used to have 2 zones and now you're 1 and you didn't get any voice in it. But maybe this person is actually saying, I don't know what to do because I'm in 2 zones and he or she would like to change it. Is that going on here?
There's a individual interested in purchasing it, but it's very concerning to them that it's split zone because they just see problems with it being split zone. Because typically when you have split zone, you have different setbacks, you have different rules, you have different regulations. It so happens that these 2 zones are very, very similar. It has the same setbacks, it has the same uses. However, when somebody looks at a property that's split zoned, it's understandably concerning to them. So she petitioned me to have the planning board look at it and see if it could be a warrant article.
Yes, Mr. Kelly.
I think
The property's up for sale. Let me put it that way.
maybe that the 2 zones, even though they're reasonably similar, I believe that whoever made this up wanting Tenny Mountain to just go back just so far is commercial. Because if you put it commercial, then you can go right up over Tim Mountain right down to your house and continue on. And so they had that as agricultural, but they had commercial just with a funnel going up through that road, and I think that's why it is. Now, again, as I said, like the signs too, or the other subdivision lots where they keep changing it, if we change that into commercial, then there's nothing to say that they can't. Maybe topographical you couldn't, but legally you could go right down to South Main Street. So I think the intent was to limit the amount of commercial businesses that can.
Maybe a good assignment would be for a little historical investigation as to why the line ended up where it is.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the first place to start. Understand the logic that was behind the line.
There's a lot of different banks out there. You can let them know.
Right. I'm, if I may.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
struck by the notion that we all seem to be in agreement that there's very little difference between the 2 zones. And so if the entire issue is that a third party, say a lender or a developer, doesn't really understand Plymouth zoning, then it seems like it's an education problem with them, rather than an issue that we've got to involve the whole town in.
Yes, Mr.
I think Mr. Wilson has hit the nail right on the head.
I think so.
And this is not something that is brand new since Marion became the planner. This is something that's been going on and on and on. And there is a problem with the term agricultural to some people.
Yeah.
And there is no problem with it. They have to come to Plymouth. Plymouth doesn't have to go somewhere else. So let them deal with Plymouth, as far as I'm concerned.
Mr. Randland, were you raising your hand there?
No, that's fine.
okay.
I was just saying, if we couldn't come to a consensus one way or the other, then to go ahead and bring it as one individual, just if we had someone coming to do a subdivision or something, and, put that one to rest rather than do a complete study on each and every one of them, or, just arbitrarily say, let's go ahead and change them and let's conform them to one thing.
Okay, I'm getting a sense that you don't want me to go forward with that, but could I just bring the map next time? Could we just at least look at the map so we can see if it's 40% or 20% or see if it makes sense?
I would love to look at the maps for the next meeting.
Fine. So let me just at least bring the map, and then we'll at least know what we're discussing, because I don't know.
Right.
And in terms of the history, I don't even know where to find that history. So that's why I was hoping to bring it up here and see if someone knows why. But let me just, if I can
Yeah,
bring the
please do.
map, then maybe it will jingle something, and someone can say, okay, it went like this because.
And personally, I'll just say that I'm in agreement with what Mr. Wilson, Kelly, and Ahern said about this, and Mr. Randland too. But I do think also as a board, we're not just charged with keeping the status quo because that's the way it was done some other time, and that if somebody comes to the board and says, I have this property, it's in 2 zones, and I don't know why, and I'd like it to be somewhere else because these are the very good reasons, I think that we do deserve to that, to respond to that citizen's request. It's not really coming to us right now in that form, but I do think that it's not just a dead issue, that it's something that we do need to consider, possibly down the line.
Mr. Chairman, I think possibly, maybe at one time there were 2 properties, and somebody bought them, and this was zoned this way, and it's all one now, but the zoning line was on that basis. Somebody had a small lot and bought this 1 acre on 100 acres, and just to have 100, and they were zoned that way at the time.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, so I think it's good historical investigation to be done. Mr. Kelly?
At one time, that whole section was agricultural, right, Mike?
I believe so.
Yeah.
It just makes sense.
Yeah, I know it was. And so they purposely put a channel up through that Tenny Mountain Highway as commercial. So agricultural was before the commercial, so that it isn't to infinity as far as not being able to find why they changed that, only that one corridor up through, and not just say we want all commercial instead of agricultural. So I think that I think we're sort of beating a dead horse for one person.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Ayer.
Also, the master plan subcommittee that met made some changes on definition of agricultural zone to clear up almost 99% of what this person has a problem with. And if they were to read the master plan now, I think it would clarify everything for them. They could show it to the bank, and I don't think...
Well, again, let me reiterate that it has nothing to do with agriculture. It has to do with that there's 2 zones. It could be B and C, Zone B and Zone C. But to put a line through your property arbitrarily, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, zoning should be logical, and it should have a logical reason why the line's there.
But where are you... I realize in most of the property now come down to the base, almost to the base of Tim Mountain. So I can see your point as far as that's concerned, to go up to the property lines there, but I can't see going any further up that hill and making it as one zone. So, because if you make it one zone, then they have the possibility of going right up over the top of that hill in commercial.
I think we're talking about, is it developed or undeveloped? And the part I'm talking about is developed, and it's been developed, and it's all been used as one use. So why is it in 2 different zones when it's all been one use?
Well, why don't we come at the next meeting with the snapshot, and that'll solve some of the questions.
Yeah. If it's undeveloped, yeah, you're right.
So I thought that piece of land, is that 25 acres you're talking about?
Let me bring the map next time, and then we'll see, because I don't, maybe I'm even remembering.
Right next to Bob Dragon. It's the 25 acres, and that hasn't been developed.
No, Bob Dragon's property.
We'll find out at the next meeting, to be sure.
No, his property, that's all been used as one thing.
So,
Okay, but his property
town planner,
over the hill.
are there any other warrant article issues?
Oh, okay, and then number 4, okay, so I guess we're going to wait on this one too, but what it was, again, I want to clean up the zoning. I want to study the downtown area and determine if some of the property should be rezoned to VC, Village Commercial, because we actually have agricultural zone in the downtown, and how many different zoning districts do we have downtown? 4. We have 4 zoning districts downtown, yet it's downtown. It's all got the same character, and it should be the same zone.
What part of Main Street are you talking about? Green Street, right?
One side of Main Street has civic institution, village commercial zone, and then there's multifamily housing and agricultural zone.
Again, I think this would be a great opportunity to have a map in front of us. So,
Yeah, that one we need a map, but you know, you'll see like the sewage treatment plant that's zoned agricultural, and you know, things that are downtown.
so
You would need a map.
So I think,
And
I think that you are asking, you know, from the logic, using the logic that there are 4 zones in what would common sense seem to suggest there should be 1 zone, could you bring to us what it looks like in some proposals? Is that what you're asking us?
It just
Yes.
makes me wonder, because this zoning down street had been run around the course as long as I can remember, and probably a long time before that, by a lot of different planning boards. And there must have been a reason for these type of different zonings. And if somebody wants to start to develop down by Green Street and down by South Main Street, then I wish they would come out and say, we want to put some commercial businesses down there, so we'd like to rezone it. I don't like, I believe the buzzword now is transparency. And I wish that they would be a little bit more transparent in doing it and saying why we want to rezone that.
Okay, so are we giving the planner the go-ahead on this last one to show us what we've got and...
So what is and what's proposed?
Exactly.
I think we better have a map, though.
Yes, we'll definitely have one.
Okay.
Anything else then? From the town planner?
No, that's it.
Okay.
I've got a lot to do. Oh, except for dates. Okay. So, let's see. I don't know how my schedule's going to go, how many fires I'm going to have to put out, but our next meeting is December 3rd, Planning Board Work Session, Thursday, December 3rd. The library has contacted me. They would like to give us an update on what their proposal is, but they're not exactly sure if they're going to be ready December 3rd. They will let me know on Tuesday. So library will let me know on Tuesday, okay? What I'd like to do is with these that you've said, let's go forward with, I'd like to have some kind of language on December 3rd, okay?
Okay.
And then maybe at that point we can see, we'd like to have a public hearing December 17th. Maybe I'm moving too fast on this. If we want to have any of these for warrant article, then we need to look at having a public hearing on December 17th. If you feel like, whoa, you are moving too fast on this, that's fine. I'm not trying to force anything down it. Just let me know. Town meeting's coming, and I finally had a little break in my schedule that I'm looking at this.
Okay, so we'll make that determination at our next meeting.
Yeah, at December 3rd, if there's one that you said, you know what, I'm really concerned about this, let's get it on the warrant article, let's look at having a public hearing December 17th, let me know. Because the RSAs are really specific and strict that you have to have the first public hearing by this date and you have to have the second one by this date. It's not as strict as December 17th, but I was looking at not having additional meetings. If you guys don't mind meeting, 4 or 5 times in January, fine, but I was looking at just following.
Let's cover it at our next meeting, because that's when we'll have to make those decisions.
Yep.
Great. So there are 3 items left. 7th is unfinished and other business. Does anybody have any unfinished or other business? Mr. Wilson?
None.
Okay. 8 is public comments. Yes.
I'm here mostly because I'm concerned about the zoning ordinance in general. When the master plan was finally adopted, there was money set aside by the town to have professional people who have more time than our planner has to consult with the planning board and to totally revamp the zoning ordinance from top to bottom. We've been piecemealing, putting together changes in the ordinance for I don't know how many years. And it's time that with some professional help, the planning board look at the whole ordinance from top to bottom. Because what's happening is these questions about where lines were and why they are where they are, all the comments that you made tonight just point to the fact that the ordinance needs total revision from top to bottom. And then the town needs to look at where they want zoning lines to be and to reorganize the whole ordinance. For years and years and years, we have been making these little spot changes here and there. we've contradicted ourselves. We've made this kind of mishmash of language that someone needs to spend a considerable amount of time to sort through. We have the money. We appropriated the money, I don't know how many years ago, to hire consultants to do this. And I don't know why we're still piecemealing this whole thing together. It needs a total revamping, and it needs to start from the get-go, page 1 all the way through. And all these definitions that have been tinkered with and over the years they need to be sorted out, and the whole thing needs to hang together as a one document, not little bits of stuff here and there and everywhere. That's my primary comment, and I would really urge the board to minimize the amount of changes that you continue to make each year and try to look at addressing the whole problem from start to finish. My other comments are not as global as that, but in terms of single property owners that have a problem with the way their property is zoned, have recourse to petition for a zoning change, so that it's not necessarily up to the planning board to remedy a particular problem on a particular piece of property. The owner can petition to have the ordinance changed if they're having problems with the way their property is zoned. The discussion about the clinics, the methadone clinics, and I applaud your planner for bringing this up, because I think this is an issue that maybe the town needs to be proactive about, is very similar to the discussion that we had several years ago about sexually oriented businesses. Not that the two uses are the same, but that it was the kind of situation where this had been a problem in other towns. We saw that what was going on, and we zoned before we ended up having a problem. So I would encourage you to do that. And then, as a resident of Highland Street, I just want to put in my 2 cents about the residential nature of the street. And yes, it is a busy street. And John, you're right, when there's no school in session, it's a totally different street than when school is in session. And I guess traditionally, historically, it has been a residential part of our town. It's one of the older parts of our town. Some of the oldest houses in the community are on Highland Street. When you start to change the zone and you move it to a less restrictive zone than single family, and you start allowing other uses on that street, that's what's going to happen. You're going to start to diffuse the integrity of the zone. If you allow commercial, civic uses, that civic use is not going to go into a zone where it's currently there. You're going to have vacant offices. You're going to have buildings that are not being utilized in the zone where those uses are currently allowed now. I would even maintain that over the last, since I've lived in town, which is quite a while now, that Highland Street has become more residential. Properties have gone from being commercial to office space, less intensive uses, and uses have been abandoned, such as Lionel's, the store that was at the top of the street. That could become residential. My property, my house, was originally at one point a tea room and a VFW hall. It's now residential. The office building where the McLean property and the doctor's offices are, those used to be restaurants. It's gone to a less intensive use. There used to be a gas station beside not beside my house, but one down. That's no longer there. So even the forestry building that used to be a civic use is not used in that manner anymore.
Well, what is the use of that building?
What is the use?
Yeah, the forestry.
Storage, I think.
Storage, I think.
Oh, okay. I couldn't tell what it was. Okay.
So if anything, the uses on Highland Street have been becoming more residential, less intense uses, and and it's not a single zone from that Main Street to Tenny Mountain Highway. There's more than one zone there.
Correct,
So,
correct.
That was a little misleading, I think, the way it was stated.
I'm sorry, I didn't,
Right. But anyway, I'm just here to make the case
Yeah.
that Highland Street is a residential street. I hope it stays that way.
yeah. My intention was just to study from this part to this part and look at it, not that it was all one zone, no, but,
Thank you. Yes?
I second her idea of really seriously studying the whole philosophy of our zoning ordinance. It was started in '61. We did the master plan in '84. And just for information, a majority of the zones were established with an offset, say like the single-family residential zone and the agricultural zone in the south was an offset of 1,000 feet from Cummings Hill Road, which is not a straight street. So that's why you get curvy lines. So these other zones that have taken place since our master plan for the industrial, commercial, and that type of thing are basically two reference points that are offset from a major way, and at the property that might lie in between, when you draw the line to connect the points, happens to get in a split zone. And as far as a person doing a commercial entity, I rezoned my property down here on Route 3 because it was single-family residential, and my use could be in any zone, but the industry standards recommend, especially when you are dealing with a government agency, that you conform to the town master plan for the use of a particular zone. And so that's up to the applicant, myself. I went through the process of getting a petition, getting the signatures, put it up the flagpole, see if everybody agreed that that was a good idea to rezone a portion. The other part is in 1982-84 zoning regs, when you had a split zone, the original statement said, when you are connected to a town-owned road in a more restrictive zone, then all of your property would be by the most restrictive if you had a town-owned road frontage. It has been massaged, word processed to include other verbiage that got away from the town-owned road and just said street. My property, I have 65 acres, and I have a state Route 3 is a state highway that fronts my property. I have a little corner on the south side of Thurlow Hill that is in single-family residential zone, and it has no frontage on any street. But the original wording of that rule was it was a town-owned road, but it has been since modified over the years. And we do have so many individual adjustments to the zoning ordinance that don't look at the overall big picture. So if you're that close to the forest, you're going to look for one pine tree rather than step back and see what is the intent and philosophy of our most restrictive zone, which is single-family dwelling. And then if you look at the 6 items that we're trying to mitigate in zoning, the whole purpose of zoning is sight, sound, smell, vibration, groundwater, and safety. Those are the 6 reasons as to why we even have zoning. That's the whole purpose of zoning planning boards, is to mitigate those 6 units. Well, we as a board and the citizens obviously don't know that as a whole. So we need to look at the purpose and intent, and then of course obviously what has changed on downtown area when I did the parking study is that the use changed, not the zone. So Silver Hall is in the village commercial zone, which should be in the civic institution zone. These 7 buildings here are in the civic institution zone, but 7 out of the 6 generate money, so it doesn't sound like they're very civic institution. And obviously Green Street, which had very little on it until the last 20, 25, 30 years, was agricultural zone, but obviously the use has changed, so that zone is not appropriate there. But we need to understand it's not necessarily what you can do as far as a use, it's the accessory elements, setbacks, parking. That's what was so hard about getting parking coordinated downtown. You go on one side of Main Street, I have a 15-foot setback. On the other side, I have a 30-foot setback. Well, there's not a whole lot of Main Street, and the village commercial zone is very limited what left we can do with it. So having multiple zones makes the process of complying with our zoning ordinance, when you look at all of the use list and then all of the other elements that go with that use. And so I think so you don't go into trying to make any change not understanding what is your unintended consequences of that change. You really need to re-look at that whole use list, the accessory elements, and all these other conditions that are put on a particular application for zoning. And I think the only good way to do it is to study it and then see what was the history of it. And I can tell you the majority of all your zoning lines were established by offsets from a particular main point so that it could be a measured, verified, validated unit of measure. So it's tough to make a mark out in the woods where one zone would go to another. So you have to use a surveyed monument, fixed point that you can say, okay, it's X number of feet off from this street, and that's why it changed. And obviously, the political will, i.e. the citizens of the town, are the ones that have the big input here. And again, I agree with this. We've wrestled with the term agricultural zone, and a lot of people don't recognize what use you have in business-wise with the agricultural zone. And we just have a lot of terms that people really, they read, but they haven't done any research to look them up and see what they mean by state law. It's in the books as to what those terms mean and what they would tend to mean as far as zoning. So I would concur with her recommendation about looking at the whole plan.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly.
I think they're commendable as far as what they want, but I really think that, you know, we had a $20,000 study on the fire department, and it was said that we were supposed to have 2 fire departments about 2 or 3 years ago, and we still haven't even got one decent fire department. So in my estimation, it's $20,000 that although we now know we should have 2 fire departments, but we don't have the money to build the 2 fire departments. We have a library that we're talking about, we have a fire station we're talking about, we have the school that we're talking about, and we have the police department that we're talking about, all major construction. And I think we have enough on our plate so that the zoning might be important, but I think these other things are much more important. And I think if we studied the zoning, then we should have the ability to do something about it, not with the fire, the study on the fire department. We had nothing, we didn't have any end results that ever came out of it. It was $20,000 paid to somebody down in Texas somewhere, and that's as far as it ever went. So, and by now, that study is going to be completely outdated. So I really think that we should consider how much we've got on the table and what are the things that are more important.
Okay, and just to remind everybody that, public comments is for the public to comment, and it's not necessary for us to, in a sense, go back to other business to do that. But a very brief
Am I still?
last public comment.
I just want to respond to Mr. Kelly's comment. This is the planning board's job, the zoning ordinance. planning for the town of Plymouth is the zoning board, the planning board's job. Building fire stations and police stations and so forth is not the planning board's job. And I'm asking you to do your job.
Okay, very briefly, Mr. Miller?
Yes, on the, your number 2 line item of accessory dwelling, we did pass a building code in this town, an international building code for which we now concur with, has a nice definition of accessory dwellings. That's what we subscribe to.
Thank you. Mr. Ahern, are you on number 9?
No.
Oh, okay.
I want to remind the public that Mr. Kelly sits as the selectman's representative, so he is coming at it from 2 different. And I take the suggestion of relooking at the zoning regulations. I'm sure there's some areas that can be improved. I'm not sure about revamping the whole thing. I know that I want to remind the planning board, we had paid an outside consulting company to look at our master plan to redo the whole thing because there were, I guess, a lot of problems. And I don't know, it was 3 years ago or so, but and I can't remember the exact cost. I think it might have been close to $20,000. Does that sound? I think, but the has already been appropriated. It's already been appropriated. It was appropriated 3 so years ago. But they got paid the money, and I think a phone call went out to them that there were some problems with the work that they did, and they were no longer in business. The money was, they used it, who knows, and they're no longer in business. That's the rumor I heard. That was the master plan, an outside consulting company. And I think the town of Plymouth can do much better than that on our own. Okay, this obviously is an important topic for people to talk about in the future, and I thank Ms. Kent for reminding us of the fact that that money is there and has been there for 3 years, and maybe we'll discuss this as an agenda item on a future agenda. But seeing no more comments from the public, and that we're on agenda item number 9 for adjournment, usually Mr. Ahern. Mr. Wilson steals the day from Mr. Ahern and moves to adjourn. And everybody is marching with their feet at 8:38.
I had my 4 score in 7 years.
Okay, what?
Four score in 7 years.